Could you share with me, with us, a bit about your journey from medicine to entrepreneurship?
In my final year of medical school, there was a situation where nobody could get food after 6 p.m. at the hospital where I studied.
So I've always had this sense of agency to say, I need to do this, I need to do this, just in case I die.
Identifying a problem could ultimately lead to business ideation and execution.
Tell us about what does Novamed do?
Tackling, solving problems in emerging markets related to healthcare.
Welcome to Cocktails and Blurbs. I'm your host, Lindiwe. And today we are mixing it up with Dr. David Walcott, a medical doctor, a maestro and entrepreneurial spirit from the Caribbean. David is not just shaping healthcare, he's also shaking up the business world. From doctor to innovator, his story is as captivating as it is inspiring. He's been recognized by Forbes, the World Economic Forum, and the freaking United Nations. David brings a unique zest to every venture he touches. So let's raise our glasses to a dynamic conversation with Dr. David Walcott. Get ready for a blend of insights and flavors on today's Cocktails and Blurbs. Cheers. Dr. Walcott, is such a pleasure to have you on Cocktails and Blurbs. I am so excited to have you. I remember when I met you in Davos, I was so impressed I also saw your profile on LinkedIn at the time, and I just was so impressed to see a young man that has achieved what you have. And so it's such an honor to have you on Cocktail and Blurbs.
No, very happy to be here, Lindiwe. Good to be connecting. We'll soon to be connect again in the flesh. You have my blurb, I have my cocktail, and so looking forward to the conversation.
Yes, cocktail and blurbs. Cheers. We must start with a proper cheers.
Of course.
Cheers. That looks like water, though. Could you share with me, with us, a bit about your journey from medicine to entrepreneurship? What drove you from that? Because normally people who become a doctor, you're passionate about healing. And when did you think, you know what, I want to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, well, so for me, it was always, I suppose, a part of my personality to be curious. And I think that's one of the things that led me to do well in medical school. Medical school was this mountain of knowledge that you sort of had to be curious to navigate. And I found myself navigating medical knowledge, I would say, relatively comfortably. But there was always this yearning to to do more and to solve problems. It's funny, my family will say, if there's a if there's a solution, I'll find 5 problems to the solution and pursue them, right? So I think when you have a curious mind, you tend to look for areas to explore, right? And so for me, that often looked like business, whether starting a business or investing in businesses. It really, for me, is 2 different sides of the same coin. And so when I was actually in medical school, I remember in my final year of medical school, there was a situation where nobody could get food after 6 p.m. at the hospital where I studied.
Oh, wow.
And so we decided to respond to that by starting a business. It was a cafe called On Call Cafe. And we sold it, 3 years later. And that was my first foray into business. And it sort of showed me how it is that identifying a problem could ultimately lead to business ideation and execution.
When I was reading your bio and also looking at your LinkedIn profile with the qualification you have, they are so diverse, right? You've actually went to all the most amazing schools, to Oxford, NCEAD, like you name them. So looking at them, it's obvious that you are a genius. So, tell me more about what inspires you from the education perspective. Like, how do you decide to say, what is it that is your next in terms from an education perspective?
It's hard to give you a a clean answer just because I've found that my approach to education and any sort of skill acquisition is, I would say, relatively intuitive. So I wouldn't necessarily have planned out my career from A to Z. When I did medical school, I didn't know what I was going to do next. Then I did my master's and I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. Then I did my PhD and I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. And then it goes on, right? And so I would say my approach has always been, I think the best decisions are made with the most information.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we rush to make decisions and create certainty very early by designing a path from A to Z without having a full understanding of what lies in between. And so for me, I would have acquired knowledge in medical school that would have equipped me to decide, okay, well, maybe I should pursue this master's degree. Then during that master's degree, I would have reflected and then made a decision again. And so for me, it was a series of decisions that were made. Some people may consider it, you know, relatively last minute because these decisions are made, you know, towards the dusk of a phase. You know, you're ending medical school, what next, as opposed to sort of predefining it. But for me, I have found that, you know, the best decisions for me have been made when I have the, you know, the most information, right? And so I sort of have believed in trial and learning by doing. And that has really defined my academic journey. So through medicine, I learned, okay, well, immunology is an exciting space to be in, drug development. I mean, look at what happened with COVID. Immunology is also probably one of the most attractive spaces in biopharma now. Through that, decided to do a PhD and then decided to go into business. And so there's been a series of pivoting that has informed my academic journey.
You know, like I think what we spoke about is really interesting. You know, the way your approach to education, and I think is one of those things that I think sometimes we feel like we don't have a lot of, you know, role models specifically as people of color sometimes. And most of the time, you know, by the time you get to varsity, you feel like that's your career. And sometimes you don't even have the money or the support or the luxury to even think of changing or doing something else, right? So, I mean, from your perspective, in terms of your background, how has that, you know, impacted the decision you make in terms of what you are studying?
I think it's important to solve for both short-term and long-term, right? At the same time. And so for me, the short-term solution is, okay, well, I have to think through sustenance, right? And I have to think through food on the table.
Exactly.
Which is a separate question from what do I do long-term. Now, sometimes you're fortunate to be in a position where your short-term needs are subserved by your family or you know, some sort of other means that allows you to focus more on long term. I personally believe in just solving for short term with a view to then solving for the long term, right? And so obviously, you know, if you're from a family that is well to do, you solve for short term much easy, you know, much in a much shorter time span. But it's important to think through both of those things at the same time. And so for me, fortunately, I sort of went through school on scholarships, and so I was able to save a bit of money to allow me to feel less short-term pressure, which then allowed me to explore, you know, my long-term interests and really invest my time and energy in things that would yield in the medium to long term, like Novamed, right? Investing in these assets and building the skill set.
No, I mean, it's interesting that you said, because I don't have two long term goals. My goals are always 6 months. If it's long, it's a year. Because I just feel like if I have like 5-year plan, I'm just gonna find myself procrastinating, thinking I still have time, you know, I could still do that. So for me, that's the reason my goals are always short term. So it's just to drive me. And another thing which is very strange, I don't know, many people find strange, that I always thought I was not gonna live long. So I've always had this sense of agency to say, I need to do this, I need to do this, just in case I die, you know? So it's not a good way to look at life, but it has served me well, though. Tell me about Novamed. When did you decide to start Novamed? And also, I mean, tell us about what does Novamed do, and also, you know, your goals with it.
I decided to start Novamed when I decided to not work at and for McKinsey. um, so look, Novamed is a healthcare investment firm. We started off as a consulting firm, and it was really my take on uh, tackling, solving problems in emerging markets related to healthcare. So I felt like, I had sufficient experience as an operator and as an independent consultant to be able to I love the cocktail, to be able to solve problems, in healthcare in emerging markets. And it started off with doing, project by project. And so you're gaining experience, you're gaining exposure, doing projects in the Caribbean, Latin America, the Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia. And over time, you develop a sort of macro kind of landscape view of emerging market healthcare that allows you to be able to see opportunities and create value in different assets. And so over time, what that translates into is building up a capital base where we've been able to invest in different types of assets. So one sort of pillar is investing in mature consumer healthcare assets, hospitals, clinics, pharmacies, etc. One pillar is healthcare venture. And so we invest in early stage healthcare companies in emerging markets around the world. We've actually just launched the first healthcare accelerator in the Caribbean. And third, we invest in real estate, biased towards healthcare, but not exclusive to healthcare.
I mean, from a funding perspective and being able to raise, I'm not even going to say how much money, you have, have been able to raise with your group. And also I would like you to talk about that, because I think, when it comes to us, I'm talking about specifically from people of color and Black people, we know that in terms of accessing VC funding is a big challenge, right? TechCrunch released their report that actually the past quarter, less than 1% of funding went to Black companies, right? And you, as a Black man, and, how did you do it? Because I think your story is so important in terms of, inspiring the next generation and a lot of young people who feel that, how do I get there? Because you feel like, even for me as an African, your race, when you walk in a room, and it doesn't matter how smart you are. I mean, you are brilliant until somebody sees your CV, but when you walk in the room, you are deemed incompetent until proven otherwise. And how have you managed? Because I want you to talk about that, because also the figures are astonishingly amazing.
It really just comes from grit. Grit is what gets you to reach out to funders who probably, statistically speaking, aren't likely to fund you. One, grit is what gets you to dig into the deal and really understand the economics, even if you're not a sort of kind of core Wall Street finance guy. Grit is what gets you to identify deals and negotiate with sellers to get favorable terms. And so all of these things I've sort of had to do individually. I've had to learn to, in as much as I would say my strong point is more around the sort of strategy and really optimizing business performance from an operational standpoint. I've had to learn that I've had to learn this sort of capital raise game, packaging deals, structuring deals, etc. Just because if I don't do it, who will, right? And so the sort of short answer to your question from a soft kind of character trait standpoint is just grit and I suppose a refusal to lose. There's no one person who holds your destiny, and I think regardless of how hard the environment is, regardless of how strong the headwinds are, if you keep knocking, that door will be answered, right?
where you started, like now my children are at the ages where, we're looking at colleges, like my son is in Georgetown. And I think, there's that to say, it doesn't matter where you go to school as long as you go to school. But, I don't believe that. And I know that where you go to school also matters in terms of who you have access to, right? So do you think the fact that you went to some of the best schools in the world and basically where the schools that attract the cream of the crop has made it easier for you? Not necessarily, I mean, I know it's not easy, but at least, in terms of getting your door in and having people to be willing to listen to you.
At the end of the day, we all have to make decisions that have to be taken in the absence of complete information. And so we look for mental shortcuts, right? And so when you see Oxford or Harvard or whatever it is, it conveys a certain level of, I would say, perhaps intellectual competence that allows for faster decision making. And so I would say for sure, it has opened doors for me because a lot of information is packaged into that very short word. And it sort of conveys the types of, I would say, character traits that many, lots of stakeholders of influence are looking for. Obviously, on a direct level, it directly gives you access to these networks. So I would say there's a sort of direct benefit from network access, but also an indirect benefit by virtue of the signaling nature of an Oxford or a Harvard. That being said, some of the most brilliant people I have met have actually not been to, many of these sort of, Ivy League, quote unquote, top tier schools. And so while I think it's useful in conveying information quickly, this same information can be conveyed in many other ways, right? And so anyone who is not sort of graduate or candidate of these schools should not be discouraged from, pursuing a success at the highest level.
No, that's exciting, and I mean, I think also I've been looking at, where you've been from being, the young global leader of the World Economic Forum, and you see that UCL. I'm like, damn, what can this guy not do? I mean, you've, bring, the awards you had from your IMF, UN. I mean, these are the top global organization that actually makes you not just, a Caribbean leader, but a global leader. And, would you advise the next generation or the young people that will be listening to this to, pursue that and push to get to the point where they say, I mean, what do you think, what importance do you place on those things?
I've just sort of always seen human beings as human beings, right? So regardless of what your position is in life, we all came in one way and we're all going out the same way. And so I've never really been one to pedestalize many of these institutions, IMF, WHO. I mean, they're just run by human beings who are born in a different time and space. And so, of course, I identify as Caribbean, yes, for practical purposes, right? I identify as Jamaican, for sure. But I am much less concerned about my identity as, I would say, Caribbean or Jamaican, or even I would say Black, than I am of my identity as a human being. And so I tend to not really see very many barriers, whether it's between myself and other human beings or between my institution and other institutions. And so my advice to young people would be just to lean in, right? Sometimes we don't lean in because we feel like there's a barrier between us and them, right?
Yes,
but I think once we realize that the them is not really them, the them is also us, it allows us to lean in more, right? And so that is a perspective I think has really, really helped me. Again, of course, we all have our identities that can be framed in different ways, but I think the most useful identity of all is to identify as a human being and have the human in you see the human in others. And I think there's actually an African proverb or word. It's called sawubona. I think I'm not quite sure if it may or may not be Zulu. I may be mistaken here, but it means I see you, the human in me sees the human in you. And it has always resonated with me because I think that's the most light and conscious way of navigating the world.
Rejection, right, and failure, and it's one of the biggest things that I think I've seen limits many young people or many people in general to trying. And you don't want, because rejection hurts, right? And failing sometimes hurts because failure is personal. So as you start to question your value as a person, and who I am, and also society. We celebrate people like you who have been so successful because you are there, we admire you, but very few of us will ask about the journey. Everybody's like, we are so concerned or looking up to the destination rather than the journey, how you got to where where you end up. And having a positive relationship with failure is important. That's what I have. I fail so many times, and the people who are successful are actually the people who fail the most because you try the most, right? Yeah. So every idea, it may be a great idea. No matter how brilliant you are, you never know whether it's going to work or not. I mean, look at Metaverse, for example. It's been a fantastic failure with all the money, put behind it. It just didn't achieve, what the guys behind it wanted to achieve. So my question for you, you've achieved a lot and relatively at a very young age. I wasn't even, whenever I'm thinking what I was doing when I was 36, ooh, yeah, I was, yeah, right? I was even still trying to find myself. So what personal philosophies or practice have guided you through your journey?
When you are aware of how short life is, I think you appreciate the things you have, one, but also you appreciate that opportunity is not permanent, right? And so you approach opportunities with a sense of desire and urgency. And rejection just seems to matter less, right? Because if the truth is, if you are to hold two thoughts in your mind, fear of rejection and life being short, it's very hard to hold those two things in your mind, because life being short by definition means that rejection is really not that important.
That's true.
And so I think life, the sort of shortness of life is one thing that I would say has perhaps guided my risk appetite, right? Because like, okay, well, I may as well take risks. Guided my, I suppose, comfort with rejection. The truth is, and I think over time, as you experience rejection, you learn to tolerate it more. It doesn't become less, rejection is always rejection, but you've lived enough cycles of seeing the sun come out after rejection. And so you just go through the motions.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I don't even cry anymore. I'm like, oh, well, let's listen to Tupac. Sorry. Life goes on, right?
Of course. So I think that this too shall pass kind of mentality is also good. But, ultimately, I think that there's a divine power, looking over everyone. This is my belief now, right? And if you're open to this divine power, and sort of listen to that voice inside, for those who are Christians, if you're a Christian and you connect to your spiritual being, I think it gives you a peace that allows you to navigate these different storms, and it allows you to make decisions with a relatively clear mind, right? And so if you were to ask me where my anchor is, I would say that is my anchor. because it allows me a sense of peace, a sense of maybe surrender in the face of adversity, a sense of, things will just turn out fine, which feeds into everything else, which feeds into me being comfortable making quote unquote last minute decisions. And sometimes those last minute decisions are the best decisions one can make.
Looking ahead, what are your aspirations for the future of healthcare in emerging markets? And how do you plan to contribute to that vision?
I think the problem in emerging markets is it's simple to articulate, but not simple to fix. Too few people have access to high quality healthcare, whether by virtue of, economic barriers, whether by virtue of social barriers, behavioral barriers, for whatever reason, right? So my vision is to have a larger number of people have access to high quality healthcare. So high quality healthcare at scale. That is the vision I have for emerging markets. As to how we're planning to do this, I mean, and of course, I'm oversimplifying it, but it really will be investing in healthcare businesses and supporting them with achieving this mission of delivering high quality healthcare at scale.
The next question is more lighter. What does David do for fun?
For me, balance is important, but it's hard to find balance when you're in a phase of your life that requires focus. And so for me, balance is taking multiple pauses between an ocean of work. This looks like playing football. This looks like going to the gym. This looks like going for a run. I go for a run every morning in the week. It looks like, my little brother is introducing me to pickleball. So let's see what that looks like. So there's physical activity, I think that is key, but there's also your kind of social battery that has to be refilled. And so I think there's a need for companionship. There's a need for kind of, recreational, friendly dialogue. In the Caribbean, we call it liming or parring, which just means just kind of hanging out and having light, casual conversation. And for me, I would say the third thing for me is travel, right? Like I love traveling. The good thing is I travel a lot because of work, but it's also mentally cathartic for me to travel, because it just represents a shift in your literally visual stimuli, and it's very freeing for me. And so I would say those are the kind of three things I do to really clear my mind. Hopefully at some point I'll travel back to South Africa soon enough, hang out by Camps Bay or something.
I've already invited you to come next year, and you haven't answered me. So I'm gonna put you on the spot. Answer now. Are you coming next year?
I'm coming. Where exactly are you in South Africa?
I'm in Johannesburg, but we could still go to Camps Bay.
Say no more. Say no more.
We could still go to Camps Bay. We can all go all Lani, but yeah.
Say no more. Say no more. I'm there.
Okay. All right. And I always ask this of all my guests. If you were to create a cocktail that represent David, what would that be, and what key ingredients would those be?
I know we're talking. So funny story. One of the businesses we acquired is a hotel, and it has a bar. And so we've been running the bar. And so sometimes in running the bar, I make drinks. So I think in as much as I really should say rum, because rum is Caribbean, I'm gonna have to say one would be somewhat of an old-fashioned. So this would be a whiskey-based cocktail. And I think that speaks to the maybe kind of more business. I'm going to give you two cocktails. Yeah, one is an old-fashioned, smoked old-fashioned, with a little bit of rosemary, slightly burnt, a little bit of thyme, again, slightly burnt. So it's a very flavorful old-fashioned. That's one. And the reason why I like that is because the sort of burn gives it this kind of fiery, energetic, and sophisticated feel,
Okay.
but it's still a very smooth drink, right? So I would say a rosemary smoked old fashioned. What I have been mixing of late, maybe this is the medical side of me that is health conscious. No,
Okay.
is I mean, I don't even know what to call it, but it's a gin-based cocktail, a very light gin-based cocktail where I've used lavender, peach, and chamomile
Yeah.
in this sort of very sober, interesting choice of words, very
Yeah.
sober,
In a cocktail,
light,
yeah.
very sober, light, summery drink. And so I think those two cocktails for me would represent my two cocktails. This kind of lavender chamomile um gin lemonade, let's say, because it's not, we don't use tonic, gin lemonade, and rosemary smoked old fashioned.
Wow. No, you must send me the last one because you said that is healthy. That comes from America. I like cognac, which mainly Hennessy, because I'm a huge fan of Tupac and he loved Hennessy. So, if you listen to him, Hennessy, and you know what I mean, drinking Hennessy kind of thing. So,
Of course,
from that
drinking that.
perspective, so I love that. But my husband has been on the, you shouldn't do so. If I say to him, my back is so, it's like, oh, I think it's the drink. I don't feel like, I think so. Everything he thinks I should stop drinking at all. So now you must send me that recipe so that if he says don't, I'm like, I'm having the healthy, sobery cocktail straight from the doctor's mouth, ordered by a doctor.
Of course, of course. I'll sign off on that 100%.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for making the time. And I know how busy you are. I am. And I think by now you know how much I admire you. You are, really one of the people I admire so much. And I can't really wait to meet you. But most importantly, to get the kids that I work with to get to meet somebody like you who's achieved so much and yet so humbled. So thank you.